There's been a lot of talk about the Braves trading Marcell Ozuna, but Raisel Iglesias might be the more intriguing trade option. We'll discuss possible landing spots for him on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave me a comment down below. Been trying to do a much better job of getting to all those comments here lately. Thank you so much for all the great comments that you been giving me. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out as well. Just leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for all your support here at Locked On Braves, whether you're an everydayer or you just found us. Appreciate you so much for joining us here at Locked On Braves. Today's episode, we're going to talk about Raisel Iglesias and why I think he might be the more intriguing trade option for the Atlanta Braves at the deadline, and the MLB Trade Deadline is starting to heat up a little bit. We got our first big move, and it could kind of tell us what it could mean for Marcell Ozuna and the type of return that the Atlanta Braves could get. So we'll get into all that on today's episode. Well, let's start with my mock trade for Raisel Iglesias. We'll look at some suitors. I'm going to get some of your takes as well on some possible mock trades for the Atlanta Braves throughout this episode. We talk about Jesse Chavez later too. But when I look at some possible targets for Raisel Iglesias, I think the Tigers are maybe the most obvious one for me. Will Vest has been very good for them this year as their closer, but not a long track record of, being a good MLB closer. They could use another option or two in the back end of their bullpen. They rank 20th in bullpen ERA. Mets and Phillies could use some help in the bullpen. That'd be pretty interesting if the Braves traded Raisel Iglesias to either of those teams. And then the Cubs. I think the Cubs are the other team that definitely needs to upgrade in the bullpen. I think Iglesias could help them out a lot. I had the Reds too. I just don't know how much of a contender the Reds are, but they are certainly an option. But I think those four teams, Tigers, Mets, Phillies, Cubs, make the most sense for Raisel Iglesias. And unfortunately, two of those teams are in the NL East, and sometimes those deals can just be a little bit harder to work out and get together, as neither team really wants to help the other all that much. But let's focus on the Tigers here for a minute, because like I said, I think they make the most sense for Raisel Iglesias. And look, it obviously depends on how teams view Raisel Iglesias. And the reason for me that he's more intriguing is that you look at the Savant page for Raisel Iglesias, it all still mostly looks pretty good for Raisel Iglesias. So the one really bad is the barrel rate. He was 95th percentile in barrel rate last year at 4%, and this year it's all the way up to 11.9% barrel rate, 8th percentile ranking on Baseball Savant, but everything else is pretty much still there. And we know that the majority of that barrel rate is just coming from the slider, which he started to try to introduce here back into the fold over the last couple of weeks and got killed in that Yankees game, leaving a slider. The day after, he'd only threw one slider and had a pretty good outing against the Yankees. The very next day, he come back, and that's the most used pitch is that slider. So I talked about that during that postcast, maybe just trying to overthink it, facing the same team back-to-back days. It was different catchers calling pitches those back-to-back days, but the slider has been what has absolutely killed him this season. Now, I do think he has to have that slider in order to be as effective as he's been in the past. But even then, after he ditched the slider, he's still been a better reliever. Certainly has gotten better results than what we saw earlier in the year. So I still think Raisel Iglesias can be a really good reliever. And I talked about that slider. It has a -9 run value this year. And that's after last year. It had a +4 run value, and the year before that, a +7 run value. So that slider is very important to him. But I still think he can be a good pitcher without it. Maybe just not a closer, maybe not as dominant of a pitcher. But here's the other reason why I still think there's a ton of value with Raisel Iglesias. you're talking about a guy who has a lot of closing experience and somebody that has been one of the best relievers in all of baseball for nearly a decade. You look at Raisel Iglesias' time in the majors, and almost every season it's a sub-3 ERA, an ERA somewhere in the 2. Since joining the Braves, we had the amazing run after the Braves traded for him in 2022. In 2023, it's a 2.75 ERA and 33 saves. In 2024, it's a 1.95 ERA and 34 saves. The guy that has 5 seasons of 30-plus saves under his belt, a lot of experience, knows how to pitch, and like I said, has been one of the best relievers for a decade. I got to think there is some team out there that is going to find a lot of value in that. He also comes, with a good bit of money, probably $6 or $7 million left on his deal whenever a trade does happen. So I still think there's a lot of value for a contending team in Raisel Iglesias, that maybe he just needs a fresh start this year. There's obviously something going on with this Braves team. Maybe he just needs a fresh start somewhere else to get back on track. Look, you're trying to sell, a bag of goods here for a guy that's had a rough season. I get that. But hopefully you can convince a team on a track record, a guy that's been so good as a closer, a guy that's been so good for so long, and a guy that had been better up until that last start, I guess 2 outings ago now against the Yankees. But focusing on the Tigers and what the return could look like. So Zach McKinstry is a guy I don't love. And again, even like I said, I think there's some value in Raisel Iglesias. It's not like I think you're getting a top 100 prospect for him. Zach McKinstry is a guy that they kind of need right now, but he has 2 years of control through arbitration. He's having his best offensive season right now, but he is 30 years old. The real appeal for him is that he can play everywhere. But it's the only season as being a plus hitter, so you don't know how much you buy into that. But I look at somebody that at least for the next 2 seasons can elevate the Braves' depth, which is what I'm looking for. It's not like you're getting somebody here that is going to save the Braves, but somebody that can play all over the field, be a solid utility guy, has a decent walk rate at 8%, a decent strikeout rate at 21%, can run 16 steals each of the last 3 seasons. So he can do a little bit of everything for you, can play everywhere, and it elevates the depth, which is what the Braves have been really, really lacking, is just having that good depth. So again, I know a lot of these names I'm going to say, they're probably not going to wow you, but I think a guy like a Zach McKinstry could make sense for the Atlanta Braves. Sawyer Gipson-Long seems like a pipe dream and a long shot for Raisel Iglesias, but I'd at least ask. If you don't know Sawyer Gipson-Long, 27-year-old, was on the cusp of becoming a regular in the rotation, maybe middle to back of the rotation type of guy, but just hasn't been able to stay healthy. He is close to getting back, and the Braves could certainly use some starting pitching depth. So again, I don't think the Tigers would give that up in this deal, but again, I would ask on Sawyer Gipson-Long. Jake Miller is an interesting arm with perhaps some upside. He's their 15th ranked prospect. That'd be someone that I'm interested in. Dylan Smith, an interesting reliever prospect who made his debut with the Tigers this year. He's 25, got some big stuff, but struggles with commands. If he figures it out, could be a really solid setup arm. Their 18th ranked prospect. Tyler Madison struck out 91 batters in 59 2/3 innings back in 2023. Missed all of 2024 with Tommy John surgery, and it's working his way back now. So that's another interesting, bullpen arm that could be on the cusp of being ready. Jose Dixon's kind of a lottery ticket, international signing type of player, currently at the FCL level as an 18-year-old. So Jose Dixon. RJ Petit, a 25-year-old right-handed pitcher, 2.45 ERA, 0.95 whip, 9 K per 9 in 44 innings, 190 average against. So those are some of the names for the Tigers that I would be interested in if I'm moving, whether it's Ozuna, because we got a trade later that somebody brought up for Ozuna as well. So whether you're trading them Ozuna or Raisel Iglesias, I think those are some names that really interest me. Again, and I'm mainly just looking at numbers for these guys. I don't know all 30 prospects for every team out there, as hard as that is to believe. I do have 3 kids and a wife that I have to give some attention to, so I can't know everybody's farm system. But those are some of the names, just looking at their numbers, that I think would be intriguing. Now, how would I rank them? If we are trading Iglesias to the Tigers, I'd rank it Sawyer Gipson-Long. Like I said, that'd be my long shot that I'd at least ask on, because I think he could be some solid rotation depth for you. I'd ask about Jake Miller. I think there's some upside there. Tyler Madison, Zach McKinstry, Dylan Smith, Jose Dixon, and RJ Petit. That would be the order in which I rank those guys as far as who I would ask for. I'd start with Sawyer Gibson-Long. No. What about Jake Miller? No. What about Tyler Madison? And down and down. But I think there is an obvious connection there with the Braves and the Tigers to get something done. Next, we'll talk about some of the other teams that I think could be interested in Raisel Iglesias and what you could potentially get from them. We'll also get into some of your mock trades. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode is brought to you by Gameday Hue. And that's also the hat that I'm wearing. You notice that I got a hat on here. You all tend to comment whenever I wear a hat. Make sure you comment on this one because just like for Locked On Braves fans, this one hits the mark. Gameday Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. The hat pairs perfectly with my usual gear. It doesn't replace my team's logo stuff. It just adds to the lineup. It's the kind of hat that reps your team without screaming it. It's subtle, but it still says everything. Maybe right now you don't want too many people to know that you're a Braves fan, but you also want to rep the team's colors. Gameday Hue hats are the best way to get that done. And it's not just hats. You can check out their split shade gloves made for the golf course or make it the perfect gift for a fan who has everything. Right now, you can get 15% off with code MLB15 at GamedayHue.com. That's GamedayHue.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's the time to load up. Let your colors talk because colors speak louder than words. That's GamedayHue.com, code MLB15. All right, thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Solely getting you caught up with everything happening around at Major League Baseball, getting you caught up on the trade deadline, news, and rumors. The guys from MLB Game Night talking about everything happening on the field each and every night. And of course, make sure you're subscribed here to Locked On Braves. We'll have one more episode for you this week, our mailbag episode on Friday. Look for a post from LockedOn_Braves on X on Friday morning. Submit your question to that post to be answered on Friday afternoon's mailbag podcast. Of course, if any big trades happen over the weekend, we'll jump on and talk about that. I got to plan my vacation schedule better next year because we will be on vacation at the beach during the trade deadline next weekend. So hopefully all the Braves trades happen early next week. But if something big does break, I'll make sure to get my instant reactions out there to you. Let's get back into this talk about Raisel Iglesias, though. I discussed some of the options from the Tigers if they do work out a deal, some of the names that I wouldn't mind the Braves going after. The Mets are another team. I had so many people ask me about the Braves trading for Ronald's brother, Luis Angel Akunia. Would be cool. We'll talk more about that in a second because, like I said, a lot of the listener mock trades had to do with that. I just jotted this down for fun. What if they traded for AJ Minter? I don't think it's going to happen, obviously, as they weren't willing to sign him for the deal that the Mets gave him. And he's had another year of injury after dealing with injury the year before. And so that's certainly very scary. And he's making $11 million a season next year. But I just, that is very, it's an interesting thought, kind of like the Akunia deal. What if you were to do that? I don't think that's going to happen. Jeremy Rodriguez, kind of a lottery ticket, good speed. Crushed at the rookie level, struggling a little bit at A-ball as a 19-year-old. Marco Vargas, similar middle infielder, international prospect. Those are just a couple of names going down their top 30 prospect list. For the Phillies, Mavis Graves, big strikeout stuff, would be an interesting prospect to take on. Alex McFarland might be a back-end starter, but has triple-digit heat with his fastball if you were to turn him into a reliever. So those are some interesting arms there from the Phillies. And then the Cubs, Vidal Brujan, switch-hitting utility player with speed, under control for a while, still pre-arb eligible, even though he's been up and down for the past 5 seasons. Could like kind of like what I talked about with McKinstry, but a guy that's even cheaper with more control, a guy to certainly help elevate your depth for the infield spots. Vidal Brujan, Christian Hernandez, their number 11th ranked prospect, probably too high of a prospect for Raisel Iglesias, but a solid hit tool with speed. And then Jack Neely, good strikeout numbers in the minors for the bullpen, would be another name that I look for from the Cubs. But let me know in the comment section below. Maybe you are more in tune with those teams, farm systems. Let me know who you would like to see the Braves realistically get if they were to trade them Raisel Iglesias. I'm going to get into some of the listeners' mock trades that were sent in. This one from APBZ, see Brizzy on X, says the Tigers get Marcell Ozuna and Pierce Johnson, and the Braves get Dylan Smith, Chase Lee, and RJ Petit. So 2 of those were the names that I actually mentioned on the podcast in the trade for Raisel Iglesias. So you already know that I like those 2. Not as familiar with Chase Lee, but I don't hate that. Giving up Ozuna, Pierce Johnson, who, has another year of control. I think that's pretty solid. I might honestly want a little bit more than that because you are getting the extra year of control for Pierce Johnson, who's been a good and reliable bullpen arm. And Ozuna, I still think has some value as a bat, but I don't think that's a terrible package. I wouldn't hate that at all. And also in this deal, Steve Brizzy says the Braves retain all of Ozuna and Johnson's salary this season. I'm going to talk about that more in a second, too. The fact of buying prospects at this deadline, I think, should be high priority for the Atlanta Braves. Whit Price says, would you trade Iglesias and Johnson for Chandler Simpson? So I would. I would pretty quickly, and especially if Chandler Simpson can play second base, which he has in the past. It's been a little bit, but he has played second base in the past. If you could sell me on that you get a decent hit tool, top speed in baseball, Chandler Simpson that can play second base and possibly replace Ozzy Albies at some point, I don't mind doing that at all. At the very least, you get somebody that has great speed off the bench, can obviously play in the outfield. I do that deal in a heartbeat. I just don't think the Rays do. Calvin Fenner says Braves send Owen Murphy, Didier Fuentes, and Lucas Braun to the Athletics for Mason Miller. So obviously trading for one of the best closers in all of baseball in Mason Miller, guy who's under control for a while. So it would certainly wrap up the Braves closer position for several seasons. That's just a really high price to pay for me. I mean, obviously, Owen Murphy, he's coming back from Tommy John. I think he's making his debut at the FCL level either this week or maybe he already has. Didier Fuentes, I know it didn't go well in the major leagues. Still a really young pitcher that I'm high on that I think is going to be a very good starter one day. And I think Lucas Braun's going to be a solid back of the rotation guy. So I think you're giving up 3 pretty good pitching prospects there. You are getting one of the best relievers in baseball, so I understand it's going to be a high price, and that feels like a pretty high price for me. Not saying I wouldn't do it. I feel like that's a good bit to give up there for Mason Miller, who is fantastic, but you just never know what's going to happen with arms, especially arms that throw that hard. And then the last one here, or no, I got a couple more. Sorry. Josh Short King says Braves trade Iglesias to the Cubs for Will Sanders and Ty Southacene. So trying to get the Southacene duo there. Sanders, 4th-round pick in 2023, already up to AAA, has a 3.23 ERA and 83 2/3 innings this year between AA and AAA. Seems like kind of a back of the rotation type of arm. So I don't hate that, certainly for Iglesias. And Southacene hitting 209 at single A with 26 steals and as many walks as strikeouts, a 369 on base percentage guy. So I think that's a pretty solid get for Raisel Iglesias. I think if you could do that, you definitely would. Even if I don't know that any of those guys are going to be big league stalwarts, I think Sanders could pitch at the back end of rotation. I think Southacene could be that good utility guy that gets on base and has great speed for you. And obviously you get the brother coming in. I think Southacene is limited to second base just because of his size, though. I don't know if he can be that super utility guy that can also play short and third, although he does have some time at third. But I don't hate that package for Raisel Iglesias either if the Braves do trade him to the Cubs. I had a lot of people wondering what it would take to get Ronald's brother from the Mets, Luis Angel Akunia. He's 23, is Luis Angel, pre-arb eligible and controllable through 2030. 89 WRC plus at AAA this year, 68 WRC plus at the bigs this year. Probably needs to play at second base, can play shortstop, probably a super utility guy. I don't know that he's an everyday player, but as I've talked about in this podcast and looking at some of the players you could get back, a lot of the guys I'm targeting are, depth types of moves, guys that can play multiple positions for you off the bench. And so I don't hate the idea of trading for him. I don't trade it just because I want to try to please Ronald, though. And for Luis Angel, like I said, I don't know. I mean, he's still 23. I just don't know that he's going to be an everyday big leaguer. He certainly has struggled there offensively in his couple of call-ups last year and this year. The vibes would certainly be awesome. You get, Luis Angel and Ronald in there. It's hard for me to see that happening. It's hard for me to see the Mets, even as, disappointing, I guess, offensively as Luis Angel has been. It's hard for me to see the Mets just giving up on that and giving the Braves another Akunia. It's just hard to see them giving that away. A kid with that much control who gives them some depth and a guy that they've had to use at times this year. Maybe if you wanted to give them Iggy and Luke Waddell to try to trade places, so you're giving them a reliever that they need this year, and you're also replacing Luis Angel with somebody that has a similar skill set in Luke Waddell that can play second, short, a good defender, scrappy type of player. But Waddell's been better at AAA this year. He has a 117 WRC plus, so you might just be getting worse as your utility backup guy there. I don't think that's the case. I think I'd still rather have Luis Angel because of his speed. But again, maybe that helps sweeten it that you have to send somebody back like that. But then you're just doing that move to get another Akunia, and I don't know that that's worth it. Hayden Harris had a proposed trade along these same lines. Mets get Aaron Bummer, and they do need a lefty reliever, so Bummer does make some sense for them. But the Braves get Luis Angel to pair with a Ronald Akunia Jr. extension, so really thinking high there. If the Mets, and again, I doubt this type of trade would happen, and I doubt the Mets would be willing to give up Luis Angel like this. If they did that and they took on all the money for Aaron Bummer owed next year, that'd be an amazing deal. I'd do that in an instant. I don't think that happens. But that kind of brings me to the point I wanted to finish with here on this segment is buy prospects. You've already committed the money this year for an Ozuna, for a Raisel Iglesias, and you've already stayed under the tax. There's no real worry or reason for you to go over the tax now since your team's out of it. So there's no reason to try to save that money. It's already on the books. It's already been accounted for. So for guys like Ozuna and Iggy with expiring contracts, if, a team really doesn't want to, pony up the money to pay those guys the rest of the way, take on that money if you can get a better prospect out of it. So I think another part of this trade deadline for the Braves needs to be buy prospects. Take on all the money if you have to for Ozuna and Iglesias if it's going to get you a legitimate piece back. So that's what I'd be doing by the Braves, and hopefully that is going to be the case, that you're not worried about the money that you're trying to save for this year. That money's already been accounted for. You're already under the tax, and we know they got plenty of money. Buy some prospects if you can in these deals. All right, next we'll get into the news of the day, including a big trade between the Diamondbacks and the Mariners that may tell us a little bit about what the Braves could get for Marcell Ozuna when he is moved. We'll get into that here next. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, beach trips that you got coming up, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. In Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Managing money with your partner is also smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. And I can tell you, handling money is very, very stressful. You need all the help that you can get. Being able to put all of that into one place is such an easier thing to do to be able to manage your money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Take control of your relationship with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Yes, that's right, 50%. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So the Seattle Mariners, who I've been watching a good bit here lately, they're a fun team. Kevin Seitzer's got that offense rolling. Braves fans love to hear that. They make a big deal to help out their offense even more. They trade for Josh Naylor from the Diamondbacks for a couple of top 30 prospects, both of them in the teens, really depending on which site you look at. Both of them pitchers that they got are in the teens, or I should say players. I don't know if they were both pitchers, but a pretty good deal for the Seattle Mariners, getting a couple of really good prospects, and they are both pitchers. Left-handed pitcher Brandon Garcia and right-handed pitcher Ashton Izzy or who they got, number 13 and number 16 prospects, according to MLB Pipeline. So a big trade there for the Seattle Mariners. Hopefully the MLB trade line stove is starting to heat up. Like I said, for personal reasons, I hope the Braves make some moves before the actual deadline, as I will be on a vacation starting next Wednesday afternoon. So AA, if you can help me out, go ahead and get those deals done over the weekend or early next week. But you look at this deal for Josh Naylor, who I think is pretty similar to a Marcell Ozuna, both expiring contracts. Now, look, Josh Naylor's having a better year. He is a younger player, a left-handed hitter. He's only 28 years old. Having a better year overall, can play in the field. He's not great defensively at first base, but can play in the field. So he is more valuable. He also doesn't bring the off-field baggage that Marcell Ozuna brings, even if we all believe that, that's behind him and has been for a while now. He doesn't strike out a lot. He's a better player right now. He's a better value than Marcell Ozuna. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's somewhat similar in the fact that you're getting a DH type of bat rental player, and they're both kind of similar cost. And you got two top 30 prospects, which makes the rumor out there from Hector Gomez, which I kind of shot down the other day, and I still kind of shoot it down. But he had mentioned the fact that the Padres are willing to give up two top 30 prospects for Marcell Ozuna. And I said, if that's the case, you need to do that deal now. And I still believe that. But I think this Josh Naylor trade kind of gives some validity to that if he's able to pull back to, top 15 prospects, that Marcell Ozuna could get two prospects in the 15-30 range. And obviously, you look at those top 30 prospect lists, it all kind of differs based on farm system and what teams are actually want and what they are viewing in a prospect. It's very subjective, and it's different from team to team. You may get two players that aren't on the top 30 prospect list anywhere, but they are better prospects than what are on a team's 30 prospect list, or a team values those players higher than somebody that is on the top 30 prospect list. But, still, obviously they do a good job, especially over there at MLB Pipeline, do a good job of ranking these players. And if both of these players were top, 15, 16 prospects, then those are pretty good pieces that you get back for a rental player in Josh Naylor. So if he can get that type of return, I think Marcell Ozuna could get something similar. I think Laves makes a good point. It's also a veteran for a playoff team. Look, if you buy into what the Braves players themselves have been saying for the past 2 years now, Marcell Ozuna has been instrumental in helping the young guys on the team. He's been a good voice in the dugout. And if a team, believes in that and buys into that, then yeah, it's also, you could sell it on the fact this is a good veteran. He's been one of the best hitters for the last 2 years in all of Major League Baseball, and he can help, your team, get over the finish line. You could sell them on that, then I think you can get a decent return for Marcell Ozuna. So I think this is great news for Marcell Ozuna's market, that you maybe could get something of significance back for him in any type of deal. It does obviously take a potential suitor off the board in the Mariners, but as I talked about the other day, I just never thought they were a legitimate candidate, because you want to get Kyle Raleigh those at-bats in the DH spot when he's not catching. But again, I think that kind of bodes well for the Atlanta Braves trading Marcell Ozuna, which feels like it's going to happen pretty soon here. Again, it's also just tough to sell a team on a guy that, as much as I tried to talk him up a second ago, it's somebody that you're not playing on a team that is really struggling offensively. That's a tough sell to other teams right now. And they know you need to get rid of him. Now, on the other side of that, the Braves know you need this player to try to reach your ultimate goal of winning a World Series. And that's why, moving at the deadline and saving players till the deadline can be so beneficial for teams, because you get so many teams that are desperate, to get their last big run at talent. But yes, it's going to be a hard sell to trade a guy who you have essentially benched at this point for a team that's already struggling offensively. So we'll see what happens here with Ozuna. And then the final news of the day, burying the lead here, Jesse Chavez retires. I never really thought that he would hang it up, but he is officially retiring. Hey, once you can't get outs with the Braves and you can't stay on the Braves roster, it's probably time to hang it up, because he couldn't get it done with anybody else here late in his career. Certainly love Uncle Jesse. Appreciate his time here in Atlanta and all the good vibes. Look, his story to Atlanta for me personally is pretty crazy to think about, because the first time that he came over with Atlanta, it was the guy that when he came in the game, I rolled my eyes and said, Freddie, he's given this game up. Freddie Gonzalez, he's throwing in the towel here, bringing in this guy, Jesse Chavez. And then coming back later in his career, you love seeing him come out there because he was so good for the Atlanta Braves when he pitched for them and became a real, iconic figure, obviously part of the World Series team and all the great hats that he was wearing. I think he'll be back in the Braves organization in some capacity going forward. No, I don't think he's a managerial candidate for them. I already had some people ask about that, but I do think he'll be back with the Braves in some form. And Grant McCauley, he had a good tweet on X. You want to go read that? I think I retweeted it from Lockdown_Braves too, so you can get it there. But he had a good quote from Jesse Chavez talking about the next stage of his life and getting into coaching. So I think it's definitely something Jesse wants to do. And I got to imagine the Braves will find a place for him as much as he's meant to this franchise and how much the guys have loved him. All right, that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for joining me. Hayden Harris, Todd Twilly, Monty 2K says, I'll never forget Uncle Jesse standing pose watching for something else to escalate. That is a good meme out there. We can't let that one die. Laves here as well. Braves thrills. End of the world incoming. Jesse retired. Never thought I'd see the day. Joshua Johnson starting the A is going to overplay his hand at the deadline. I hope not, especially you got an opportunity now. Well, you got an opportunity here to make a move at the deadline to help you for the future and potentially get a top 5, top 10 prospect next year. You got a chance while you're just trying to retool to also restock as well. And I think this is a good opportunity for A to do that. So hopefully he doesn't drop the ball there. But thank you all for joining me. Denon Watson as well, Austin Pruitt, Brian Downing, Gene C. Gordy. Thank you all for joining here. Appreciate you so much. Denon says, do you think Skip Schumacher will be the next manager next year? It's a good candidate. I haven't thought about him. Thought he did good things there with the Marlins. So I think you can definitely put him on that short list. All right, that will do it for this episode. Make sure you follow us on social media at @LockedOn_Braves on X. Look for my post on Friday morning to submit your question for our Friday afternoon mailbag episode, and make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next.